I'm all for entrepreneurs, but I don't think the way that this self-described entrepreneur would work for everybody. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, I'm really pleased to have with me writer-director Ramin Bahrani to discuss his latest film, the WGA-nominated film for Best Adaptation, The White Tiger. I've been a fan of Ramin's for years. I love his work, and it's so cool that we finally got to have him in the podcast. And it was cool to kind of go back a little through his previous works and just hear his take on them. Although I would spend a lot more time, as you know, if I had the time. But look, The White Tiger is a great flick. And it's highly entertaining. It's absolutely no surprise at all it got a WGA nomination because this was a really good adaptation. And as you'll hear, Ramin had to do some heavy lifting in places of even some of the subtlest switches, sometimes structurally and other such things, but it could make a world of difference in the finished film. And you'll hear us talk about that. And look, Ramin was very forthcoming about his creative process and what it took to make this film. So I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You can read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. If you've never read us before, you could test drive us by reading our free issue at backstory.net or in the Backstory app. And I would hope after reading that you want to give us a shot as a subscriber. And if you do, I'm happy to offer you a discount coupon code of SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. That will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. You'll get access to anything new we produce and also our archive as well, which currently we're on issue 42, currently goes back to around issue 29. But look, I would love to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page become Backstory Magazine subscribers. So thanks for considering. And now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with WGA-nominated screenwriter Ramin Bahrani about his latest film, which he directed, The White Tiger. Okay, so Ramin, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, good to see you, Jeff. I'm fine. How are you?
Great. First off, congrats on your WGA nomination. Very well deserved for The White Tiger.
Thank you.
I absolutely love the movie, but I'm going to go backwards in time through your work first as we kind of start things without any spoilers. And then I'll make an announcement when we get into the spoiler section. Just looking at your life, when did you decide that you wanted to become a filmmaker? Did you study film?
I studied film theory at Columbia University as an undergraduate. We had 1 or 2 screenwriting classes, actually, but I never studied filmmaking. I just kind of made some very terrible short films. And I don't say that like for someone to say, oh, no, they were pretty good. No, they were really terrible. But, by like the 5th or 6th one, at least they made sense almost. But I guess my interest in movies came in high school. I had a high school teacher, Van Brown, who started showing movies one day in class, which of course we were all like, awesome, we're just going to watch movies. We thought it was like a vacation or something. But then he started talking about them as if they were things that could be discussed in a classroom setting and that we would think about. And it had never occurred to me that something like that could happen. He was showing us mainly American films from the 70s. That was kind of my first exposure that movies were worthy of thought. And, I didn't come from a movie household. My family didn't watch a lot of movies. It was more books in the house. And so that's kind of when my real interest in movies began.
I'm curious when you realized that you were going to take a tack towards writing as well, not just directing.
Well, I was interested in writing prior to that because of all the books at the house. So I grew up actually doing visual arts. I was painting and drawing all the time as a kid and in school and in summer programs and whatnot. So visual arts had been the first thing I grew up doing, and then got into reading. And then from reading, you just start writing short stories, and that kind of started prior. And then movies seemed like a way of combining all that stuff, the visual and the written. And it seemed at that time that was how you might be able to reach more people. That's what I thought at that age. I don't know if that's true or not, but at that time I thought so.
I want to talk about some of the lessons that you learned from your past projects as you were kind of coming up through the ranks. But what did you do for your breaking in story? What was your first path when you got out of school before you did 2000's Stranger, which was your first feature film?
It wasn't a feature of Strangers. Strangers was almost like a 60-minute movie or a 50-some minute movie.
Oh,
It was,
okay.
yeah, it was kind of like, instead of going to grad school, make that. So after college, I went back to North Carolina, which is where my parents were and my brother was. And I had made a 16 millimeter film at Columbia as an undergraduate. Again, just on my own, I'd conned my way into getting equipment from the graduate school and had like snuck into the graduate editing rooms and was cutting this movie there.
That's awesome.
And then, yes, yeah. And then it got shipped to me in North Carolina, a 16 millimeter print, which I had no way of looking at. So I went down to the School of the Arts there, and they had just opened a film program like 2 years prior. And I screened the film there. I convinced them, could you please show me this movie? I just want to know what it looks like. And then a couple weeks later, I was suddenly working there on staff. And that's when I met a handful of students there, David Gordon Green,
Right.
Danny McBride, Jeff Nichols, Jody Hill, Adam Stone. They were all there at that time, Craig Zobel, and kind of befriended all of them at that time and just stayed in touch with them over the years because, once David hit, he's so generous. He just pulls everybody with him, and all his buddies got kind of pulled up with him. And, after that, I left. I went to Iran. I made this one short film there called Backgammon, which I had never shown much before, but it's actually on this new Criterion DVD that came out of Man Push Cart a couple days ago. That was kind of the last short film I did, and it's not a great short film. It's when I looked at it again for Criterion, it's some parts of it are really awkward, but it kind of worked. It kind of made sense as a movie. It was kind of what I was trying to figure out how to do.
Well, what was your biggest lesson on Strangers that helped you prepare for Man Push Cart, which I want to get into in a second? Because, you said it wasn't really a feature length film. It was 60 minutes. Did you get into film festivals? Did it get seen that way?
Not much. No, not really.
So was it kind of more for just like your learning curve?
Yeah, I made it in Iran, actually. I lived in Iran for 3 years and I made it there. And it was kind of like, it was going to be even shorter. It was more like, I thought it was going to be a short film. It just kept expanding a little bit. It was a really challenging film because the lead actor was supposed to be an Iranian from America, like me, some kind of semi-autobiographical story. And the actor quit days before shooting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I had to act in the movie myself, which I'm not an actor, but it seemed like it was either that or just cancel the film. And so it was a challenging film, but there were interesting things in it. Maybe I honestly haven't seen it since then. And
well, let's get to Man Push Cart because that was the first of your work that I saw. It put you on the map. It's an absolutely great film, and I'm just curious, what were some of the lessons, trial by fire, on that you learned? Because that really, it was revered pretty much worldwide. It really put you on the map.
Man, that movie was made with me and a handful of friends. We shot it for $60,000 and finished the whole film for 80. So like the whole budget was 80 grand.
Wow.
The movie was made with 10 people. Probably a fourth of the movie was made with 4 people. So, it was endless lessons, I didn't know anything about filmmaking, Jeff. I had never gone to film school. I had never worked in the film industry. I had never been on anyone's film set. All my jobs from college until that moment were odd jobs to pay the bills while I was writing. And so, I didn't understand, like, don't shoot a location because the door looks interesting if it's in another borough. I remember we were, 2 weeks into shooting, and I had to sit down with my partners and just get the script and be like, okay, we need to throw away 30 pages. Like, I had no understanding that you can't shoot this many pages in X amount of time, I honestly didn't even understand what it meant to cover a scene. I just shot everything in moving masters. I was
Really?
really into Ho Xiao Shen at that time.
So you weren't prepared at all by Columbia, I guess then.
I'm telling you, I studied film theory at
Yeah,
Columbia.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, you would just think that they would have like one class, you
They
know?
have this, I mean, I teach now at Columbia in the graduate program,
Okay.
which is an excellent place for learning filmmaking. The undergraduate program now does have some classes, but they didn't
Okay.
have them then. And I was really into Ho Xiao Shen at that time, among many other directors, Kiarostami and so many. And I kind of wanted to shoot. On the third day, I realized we weren't shooting coverage; it was just moving masters. And
Right.
I remember being very frightened by this. And I was talking to the cinematographer, Michael Simmons, about it. I was like, "Are we really doing this?" And I got a call from a director that I had long admired but had never formed a relationship with. Later, we did. Amir Naderi, the great Iranian director who made this amazing film called The Runner that had impacted me in college. He called me out of the blue because he was friends with the DP, Michael, and he just shouted into the phone, risk, risk, risk. We were wondering what to do. And I decided we should just keep shooting the film in moving masters and forget the coverage.
Right. And what's interesting is that quote unquote mistake, as you're kind of referring to it, is part of the charm that attracted people to it, because it's instantly recognizable that you're doing something different, but you're still telling stories with moving in images. And that's what cinema is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's great to know that it just came out on Criterion. So folks, if you haven't seen Man Push Cart, go get the Criterion, because that'll probably be an amazing presentation. You know,
actually, Chop Shop also came out on the Criterion DVD this week.
Oh, both this week? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question about Chop Shop. What would be your biggest lesson moving forward with Chop Shop?
Chop Shop, Chop Shop was like trying to learn all the lessons from Pushcart about containing it, making it smaller in size. It was about like trying to be real rigorous in casting. And we did a lot of rehearsals on that film. The movie is just about two street orphans living in a junkyard in Queens, Willis Point, Queens. And we basically shot the whole movie on a Handycam, kind of roughly, before we shot the movie again with a HD camera.
That's interesting. So,
yeah.
So you did like a first iteration.
Yeah. And the kid, the lead actor, Alejandro, was a 12-year-old. They were all non-actors in the movie. There was one actor, it was the lead of Man Push Cart, who had himself been a non-actor when we made Man Push Cart. The little boy's 12. I asked him to work in that junkyard, and he was working in a glass shop owned by Rob Solowowski. And he worked there for almost 6 months before we shot the movie. So he really knew how to do everything. And everybody who worked in that area thought we were making a documentary about him because he'd been there for so long, you know. Honestly, those first three movies were amazing to make because I didn't know anything. And there's a great joy in not knowing things.
And there's also a rawness, you know, as a filmmaker that audiences appreciate. You know, there's a cinema verite style to it, of course. But actually, it's interesting that you did that first shooting of a movie, because I've talked to filmmakers about this before. It's rare that people do that. But if you think about how good many of the Pixar movies are, it's because what you're seeing in movie theaters is the final iteration after like 5 full versions of that movie done as animatics. And it's something that live action filmmakers rarely, if ever, get to do. So is that a process that you've continued in your work to kind of shoot maybe a rough version, even if you're shooting rehearsals?
I've done that before, but you know, the important thing is on the day you change it all anyway.
Right.
Sometimes on Chop Shop, we'd be like, we had no memory of what we had done because we just didn't remember how we had done it. And sometimes when we got stuck, the boy would remember and he would tell us, I think you had to put the camera in that area over there.
Interesting.
But it's good to forget that stuff. I mean, over the years, I've gotten, as you kind of learn more and you get more confident about how to do things, with each film, I feel a bit more free and loose on set. I mean, certainly White Tiger was like that. I felt very loose on set. I had planned everything, but you're kind of pushing for something else to happen every day. You know,
it's fascinating because you keep challenging yourself, and you know, you kind of come out into the marketplace with 99 homes, right? Which is different from your previous work, but it's again showing your talent for working with actors, visual storytelling. What was something different about your process on that as you were kind of breaking out into a what we would call more conventional type of movie?
Well, I mean, the big difference in something like 99 Homes and Chop Shop or Man Push Carter or Goodbye Solo is, there's a different level of budget and cast. I mean, the collective budgets of my first three films were about 1.5 million for all three of them. And, 99 Homes was a lot more. And the challenges were, working with a bigger crew, working with, very established talent like Michael Shannon, Laura Dern, Andrew Garfield, telling a larger story. The first films that they were kind of very small slivers of a life, just a moment almost. They were stories, Chop Shop and Solo are basically 3-act structures. They're quite quite conventional. They're just not conventionally told. But 99 Homes had more stories. So I think part of the learning curve was how do you do that? How do you manage telling more story, but still wanting it to basically just be a character study? That was kind of, I think, the biggest challenge. And not having access to people. Like on the first three films, I had access to the combination of non-actors and actors for a long time. Sometimes months, sometimes weeks.
Right. So you could go back and reshoot if you needed to and keep.
No. I don't mean that. I mean in prep.
Oh, in prep. Got it.
Yeah, you had a lot of time with them in prep to rehearse, to go over things, to take them to the locations and figure things out on location. On 99 Homes, with movies like that, there's just less time with the actors because they're always coming from something else.
How much rehearsal time did you have on that?
I didn't rehearse much with the actors, but I asked Andrew if he would go down to Florida. So Andrew went down to Florida. He went and stayed in a motel. I'd spent a lot of time in Kissimmee, near Disneyland. And so he stayed in a motel there where I had befriended this guy, John Manning, who had a motel where a lot of families would come live in when they had lost their homes. Actually, John Manning later is portrayed by Willem Dafoe in Sean's film, Florida Project.
Right. I was going to bring that up because it sounded really familiar.
Yeah. Sean was down there. I'd already made 99 Homes. So I introduced him to a handful of people, including John, who was just an awesome guy. I went boar hunting with John. It was a really interesting guy. And then later, Sean made him into Dafoe's character. So Andrew went and stayed in that motel. He spent time with a real estate broker who I had befriended who did evictions. And then Mike Shannon, I also asked him to go down, and he spent time in Fort Myers with that same real estate broker, Mark Joseph, who took him around, taught him the ropes, he said they could understand all that. That was kind of the rehearsal, really.
That's interesting. I mean, it's a way to inhabit your character. It's a way to kind of get in the zone. Last film I want to talk about before we get to White Tiger is, Fahrenheit 451. I've been a longtime fan of it. And it's interesting because over the years, I've seen different iterations of Hollywood trying to crack it. I know Frank Darabont was involved with the draft for a long time. They couldn't really crack it. And I thought what you did was really fascinating because, in a world where the biggest crime is being able to read, right? That's one of the biggest crimes that gets you in trouble. It was really interesting to see you recast Guy Montang, the protagonist, as an African-American, where in times of slavery, the biggest crime a slave could get in trouble for is being able to read.
Yeah.
Because this central flow of information was very controlled. So tell us what got you're in for Fahrenheit 51, and how did you realize your take so that the film could finally move forward when it had just been gestating forever?
It's funny you said all that. There is actually an image of Frederick Douglass, really, I think in the opening credits. It kind of just, it just came out of nowhere, really. I was talking to Len Amato at HBO, and we were just talking about different ideas and books and projects that I just kind of came up. Fahrenheit. This was, God, I can't remember when now, 2016 or something. And it just kind of came up, and then he thought it was interesting. And then I just forgot about the conversation, really. And 6 months later, he called me and said, I got the rights. Do you want to work on this?
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And it was really challenging because it was a bit outside of the zone of the kind of work I had done. Most of my work has been involved in some form of social realism or social expressionism of some fashion, like meaning everything I've written and made except for that film, I could go visit the real people.
Right.
And I could go I could walk into their backyard. I could follow them on the day in their job and come to understand the details of what they do. This required some kind of world building that I had not done before. And I found very challenging, especially because the once you tried to modernize the book and deal with computers, it became just kind of this rabbit hole that I found really difficult to deal with, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, something that was relevant from your work, though, is that the kind of outer fringes of society that you had detailed in Man Pushcart and Chop Shot really became relevant in Fahrenheit 451, because that was always a part of the book as well.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. So I mean, I thought you were a good choice when I heard that you were announced.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of cast it just with how I saw things. I remember people were so wound up about why did I cast a black guy in the lead. They would tell me because he's white in the book, but I said it never said that in the book. It doesn't say anything.
That's right.
And most of the characters on that side of the world, you know, like Sophia Boutella, you know, I don't know what to say. Some people ask me about the diversity of my casting in my movies, but I never thought of it in those terms. I just cast it the way I saw it in my head. I didn't do it for any other reasons than that.
It was great casting, and it wouldn't have mattered if Guy Montang was written as white in the book anyhow. Like, it was great casting. Like, you know, a good actor is a good actor.
I just wanted to work with Jordan, is the truth of it all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what was your biggest challenge on that before we get moving forward? And that's
honestly, with what I said, it was just world building. It was outside the world of social realism that I understood better.
Okay,
you know, that part made it, and being not knowing how much of a book you could or couldn't change. I think people got upset that I changed the text too much, and maybe they were right. Maybe I shouldn't have changed it that much. So it was anyway. It was an interesting project. Yeah,
I dug what you did. All right, so getting to The White Tiger, when did you first come across Aravind Adiga's novel, The White Tiger?
About 4 years before it was published, because he mailed me the rough draft of it, or emailed me the rough draft in 2004. Arvind is a really good friend of mine. We'd been friends since Columbia. We were at undergraduate in Columbia together, and we'd become friends since then, and have been friends for almost 3 decades. So I had been sending him my screenplays to read and give feedback on, and he had been sending me manuscripts. And one day, I got an email that said The White Tiger, and I read it and was just immediately, even in rough form, I was kind of blown away by it. Funny, propulsive. The main character, Balaram Halwai, was so gripping. You know, he was funny, satirical, sarcastic. He had a perspective that was very fresh, you know, very subversive. And it's just a really complex character, you know, and that's kind of how I first came to know about The White Tiger.
And did you realize that it would be a film after reading it? Like something that you wanted to make as a film? Is that kind of sometimes how you read books? You visualize them?
Initially, I didn't think about it when I was reading the rough drafts. Later, I kept thinking this could be a good movie. But, you know, at that time, I certainly wasn't prepared to make it. I don't think I would have understood how to make it. It came out in 2008. By then, I had made 3 films. In fact, I was in London screening Goodbye Solo. We had gone from Venice to London with that film, or I guess Venice, Toronto, London. And Arvind was there picking up the Man Booker Prize at the exact same time. I remember I met him the next day on the street there in London. And I think at that time I wouldn't have known how to tell that story. So I was glad that he called me maybe 4 or 5 years ago and said, "Do you want to make The White Tiger? What do you think?" I said, "I'd love to make it. Maybe now's a good time to do it." I had kind of figured out as a filmmaker how to do that. And maybe the world had kind of gotten to a place that a diverse story like that could be told on a big scale, meaning Netflix was prepared to do that.
Right. And I mean, it's great that happened. So is that what happened next? Did you basically start shopping it around and see who was interested?
First I had to find out where the book was. And the rights of the book were held by a producer in India named Mukul Deora.
Gotcha.
And so I contacted him. And fortunately, he hadn't made the movie yet. He was trying to find a new person to write a new draft of it. The other draft seems to have not worked in some way. And Mukul and I clicked immediately. We liked one another. We had a similar concept of the book. He had seen my films. The White Tiger is dedicated to me by chance. So he knew me. He had seen my name in the book. And
that always helps.
yeah. And he had already been in a conversation with Netflix, and I completely supported that decision. I was like, great, let's do it in Netflix. They're prepared to tell this kind of story, and thankfully they did.
We're going to talk more about your habit of adaptation in the spoiler section a little, so you can kind of clue us in how you were breaking down the book. But I just want to talk about your writing habit for a second. When you sit down to write, how important is outlining to your process? And something like this, when you're breaking down a book, are you using the book as obviously your blueprint and then turning it into note cards or a treatment or something like that?
If I'm writing an original script, most of my films were original screenplays. On those, it's a lot of writing in a yellow legal pad first, notes, ideas, concepts, characters, scenes. And then it's really Post-it notes on a wall.
Really? Okay. So Post-it notes are your stand-ins for note cards.
Yeah, because they're small and you can stick them really easily to the wall, and you can't write a lot on them. You can just kind of write interior apartment day. And then, Jeff wants whatever. That's about it. There's not much room for anything else. So it really forces you to distill it. On the White Tiger, though, I didn't do that. Honestly, I had read the book really so many times already. So I just read it again 2 more times and took notes. And then I just wrote down every scene that I liked in the order that it appeared in the book. And it was 200 pages.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I cut it down to like 130 pages and filled in some stuff that didn't make any sense unless you added and subtracted and changed, because it's a script, not a book. And that kind of was the rough draft and something that I could look at.
So you jumped straight into screenwriting.
I just jumped right into it.
Okay. That's interesting.
And then it was really the second draft that I started to rearrange things and rethink things.
That makes sense. Well, so when you sit down to write, do you give yourself a daily habit of a certain amount of pages to hit, or do you go for a certain amount of hours?
I'm more for hours, I guess. I like to work in the mornings. So if I'm writing, it's, you're awake pretty early. Like you're trying to sit down to work no later than 7 a.m.
Sure.
And in an early draft, I think from 6:37 until noon is good for me. Once I have a first draft and I'm into rewriting, then usually I will do an afternoon session. So it'll be 6:30 or 7 until lunch, maybe do some errands, answer some emails or whatever, and then another 3-4 hours up until dinner.
What do you do if you get writer's block? If you get it, how do you battle it?
Sit down. Just sit down for those hours.
Just keep it in the seat. Keep cranking at it.
Yeah, better to sit down.
Okay.
For me, better to sit down for those hours. Now, once those hours are gone, going for a walk always helps. For me, going for a walk always helps.
That's good to clear your mind, of course. That makes sense. And as a director, how much time did you have for rehearsal on White Tiger? Did you have a rehearsal stage?
No, not really. There was no rehearsal stage like that. I did a reading with the 3 lead actors. For the lead actor, I got lucky. He was available to me. The other 2, Priyanka and Rajkumar Rao, they're movie stars. So they're kind of parachuting in the last second.
Right.
But Adarsh was a newcomer. He had just done some supporting roles. So this was his life for like 7 months,
Wow.
And the awesome thing with him was he came to all my callbacks. So for every other part that I cast, he was there. And
that's cool.
Yeah, so he and I basically rehearsed it in callbacks with so many different actors, and he tried so many things, and we made so many discoveries. And I tend to rewrite a lot in auditions.
Do you really? So you rewrite based on the actors that are showing up?
Yeah, I like rewriting based on auditions because you can hear it, you can see it now, you can know what does and doesn't work. And I like improvisation, so actors are improvising. Even if you don't cast them, they may say something interesting that you could use. And
that's really smart.
Yeah. And I like to rewrite based on location scouting also. When I cast a location, I tend to rewrite the script for the location.
Because basically you could visualize it now. Is that kind of
yeah, you could see it now. Yeah, you can see, like I didn't know you were going to be with this red curtain all around you. So maybe this could be part of the scene somehow.
the Black Lodge. I'm stuck there until quarantine ends. But yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's actually something that, from my interviews with Christopher McQuarrie, he's talked a lot about, especially lately in these Mission Impossible movies. He feels he has to go to these really remote, crazy places before he could visualize the action sequence or what's going to happen. So
I imagine.
yeah, it seems like rewriting based on location scouts is a pretty good thing. Before we get into the spoilers, what was your budget and your schedule?
The schedule was 60 days.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. The budget, I don't know what I'm supposed to say, how I'm supposed to answer that. I don't know what Netflix would think, but
that's okay.
Anyway, it was with Scott Stuber's division at Netflix Studios, so it was a pretty good budget, I guess.
That's great. Well, I mean, and it really shows up on the screen because it's an absolutely great looking movie.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to get into the spoiler section. So podcast listeners and YouTube watchers of this Zoom, press pause if you have not yet seen White Tiger. Go to Netflix. It's sitting on your phone right now. It's sitting in your pocket. Please don't watch it on your phone, though. It is an absolutely beautiful looking movie. Go watch it on a big screen because that's what it deserves. But we are going to get into the spoilers. So let's talk about something, just from the start, there's an art to adaptation. And part of it is taking the stuff even that you like and scuttling it sometimes. What were some of the elements of the book that you knew you had to lose for the greater good?
I mean, there's a decent amount that I had to cut. I mean, it's a first person narration, the book, which is not always easy to adapt because you're only seeing and knowing what the main character is thinking and feeling and looking at. So I think some of the hardest stuff to lose for me, which we actually shot some of this stuff, was in the second half of the novel and in the film. The main character is Balram. He's a servant to this man named Ashok and his wife Pinky Madam in India, in Delhi. And the two of them have just come back from America. And there's as it's the spoiler section, there's a very big hit and run accident in the middle of the film, which makes the wife, Pinky, played by Priyanka Chopra, she leaves and goes back to New York. And now just the driver and his master are left. And in that sequence of events in the novel, his master ends up sleeping with a prostitute. She's blonde. She looks like Kim Basinger, it says in the novel. It's actually pretty funny. And the reference. And the main character attempts to do the same thing. He attempts to sleep with a white woman with blonde hair, and he fails to do so.
Interesting.
And yeah, so there's this whole trajectory in that section about some things around sexuality, but also about the reverence for white skin that the author, I think, was mocking and kind of criticizing in the book. There was no room somehow in the film for it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Balram doesn't really have a love interest in the movie. The biggest threat for him externally is really that his family is trying to marry him off, which he's very against.
Yeah.
So is it the same in the book? There's just absolutely no love interest for him at all?
Well, I mean, I hope it's hinted at in the film, and as it is in the novel, that he's attracted to both Priyanka and Rajkumar.
Yeah, no, that was clear.
He seems, I mean, he seems interested in both of them sexually, physically, who they are as rich masters,
Right.
In the novel, he has this attempt to sleep with this prostitute that doesn't work. But we shot it and cut it, honestly.
Okay. Was there anything else that you didn't even try and shoot? Just things that you left on the page?
Yeah, Ashok's character has a second girlfriend he picks up in the back half of the book. That was all cut. Never wrote it in. There's a lot of stuff in the first half of the novel that was cut out. Different things about really interesting stuff about Balram being, used, like they buy his fingerprint and pretend he's 18 to have an election frauds, all kinds of social things like that there was just no room for,
That's fascinating, especially as, his fingerprint and the concept of a signature comes in important later. But before we get there, voiceover is tough for a lot of writers because some people could see it as a crutch while others, could relish it. Kubrick used voiceover. It's okay to use voiceover. And here you had a great framing device of this letter that he's writing to the head of, a visiting head of state from China who's coming to India. And he's revealing, his inner demons and everything about him in this letter. We know that's not really what he's writing to him, but that's the framing device of it, which I thought was always entertaining. Like that would be the easiest way to say it. And it opened the door for voiceover, but you still get into that concept of How much voiceover? And how did you regulate that? I'm kind of curious. And when did you come up with that framing device, or was it part of the book?
Oh, that's part of the novel. And then in the novel, he's writing a email over the course of 7 days to Wen Jiabao, who was the premier of China at that time. And Wen Jiabao was coming to India to understand what it meant to be an entrepreneur, is what the narrator says. And I never wanted to lose it because it's so weird. I never thought I would. Yeah, when else would I make a movie where the main character is writing an email to Wen Jiabao? Never. And I love to do things in movies that I think I will never have a chance to do again, or that have never been done. And also, he's telling us things about India that a normal person in India might know. So I needed it to be someone from another country. So that it was just weird and worked. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I had ever done with voiceover was a short film I made after my first 3 features called Plastic Bag. I don't know if you've seen it, Jeff.
No.
Please check it out. It's on YouTube. In fact, it's on the Criterion channel right now, but it's also on YouTube. Cool. It's a short film called Plastic Bag that was in Venice and New York Film Festival in 2009. It's about a plastic bag's existential journey. And it is narrated by Werner Herzog, who is the consciousness of this bag.
Wow. Okay. That's immediately going into my queue.
Yes, please check it out.
Anything with Werner Herzog is an automatic yes.
Yes. And so that was the one time I'd written voiceover. And it wasn't that different in that not a lot, but probably 30, 40% of the voiceover from the script got rewritten in the edit room. And, probably 15% of it got thrown away because the images became stronger than anything we could have imagined, and you didn't need any more voiceover there. But I would say the majority of the voiceover was what was in the script to begin with, and it kind of worked. A good amount of it is from the book, and a decent amount of it was made up by me to make the script work,
And did you find yourself rewriting a lot in the editing room on White Tiger?
Somewhat, yeah. Somewhat, you did have to. Some things I added new voiceover that I wrote to make certain things more clear that were clear in the novel, but not in the film. And then there were certain passages in the novel that I loved. And when I saw the movie, I was like, you know what? I didn't put it in the script, but that section of the novel, the voiceover could work here. And it did.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you about Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. Folks, we recently published issue 42, and there's a lot of great stuff in it that you could check out in the table of contents on our website to see what's inside. If you've never read us before, I do hope you'll consider test driving us by reading our free issue at backstory.net or via the Backstory app, because there's a lot of great stuff in there. And I would hope by the end of that, you might consider becoming a subscriber. And we would love to have you as a subscriber. So I'm going to offer you a discount coupon code of SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. It'll give you access to any new content we make, and it will also give you access to our archive, which right now goes about through issue 29 to 42, and we're going to be adding older issues into it as well. There's a lot of cool stuff in issue 42, though. I really hope you check it out. One of my favorite things to do is take unproduced screenplays by writers of note and publish them with an interview with the screenwriter. So we did that with Simon Kinberg of Days of Future Past fame for his first screenplay, Ghouls of New York. It's the one he wrote right out of college about grave robbers in 1890s New York based on a real story. And it's a great script. You could read the whole thing and our interview with Simon. We also interviewed Joe Carnahan about a script he wrote with his brother, Matthew Michael Carnahan, called LA 57. Now, Joe has been trying to make LA 57 for a decade. It's not an easy film to make. It is a fantastic screenplay, though. I think he's getting really close, and I was so glad to support it, but also give you an advanced chance to read it along with an interview with Joe. He even provided us with some concept art that was cool. So look, there's so many great things for you to enjoy in Backstory Magazine. It would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and YouTube Backstory Magazine watchers support my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming subscribers. And now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with Ramin Bahrani about his WGA nominated film that he wrote and directed, The White Tiger. One of the real big strengths of the film is this incendiary look at the caste system in modern India. And, Balram's rise through it and the reverence that, he holds for his masters, as you said, to the fact that he's attracted to both of them because he holds them in such high regard, totally makes sense, hearing about it, especially through the lens of the novel. But it's also a sense of betrayal of just the lower class, which works anywhere in the world, unfortunately. And, you tease us at the beginning where you see them driving a car and he's in the back seat. You don't really understand the context because he's dressed up kind of silly. You know that they're kind of drunk. And you don't even know at that point that he's going to become their driver. And a kid steps into the road, and you do hear a very clear metallic bump that is a body hitting metal. And the rest of the movie's in flashback up to that point. We're catching back up. At what point did you realize that was going to be a device that you were going to use? Because especially since we're in the spoiler section, we think that he shows this picture of him as being wanted. Yeah. Right. Wanted for murder is what the picture says. And he's burning it. And you're like, okay, I get where this movie's going now. And that's actually not it. Like, that's actually not what gets him wanted for murder. So at what point did you realize you were going to have that narrative tease, which worked so well?
Well, in the novel, he's looking at a poster, a wanted for murder poster in the first chapter. And at the end of the first chapter, he announces that he kills his master.
Oh, so he lays it straight out. Okay.
Yeah. So in the novel, for the whole book, he's going to kill this guy, and he's commenting on it throughout. And that was the way the first draft was. The second draft, I got rid of that and decided not to tell the audience he was going to kill Ashok. And I brought the hit and run, which is in the middle of the novel and in the middle of the film. I brought part of it up front, not the whole scene, but part of that scene, to the point that you said where it looks like they're about to crash into a kid.
Right.
Even the wanted for murder is not revealed until much later. In the opening of the film, we see he's wanted, but we don't know wanted for what.
True.
I hold off on the murder until later, close to the hit and run. And yeah, that came in the second draft because I thought that I wanted to start the film with some kind of modern energy, urban, modern, a little bit confusing. I wanted to get the audience in there very quickly to wonder what the hell's going on. This is not a typical Indian film that you think it's going to be. It's not set in a village. It is not. It has American music because the two characters in the front seat have come from America. That's what they want to listen to. I mean, it's a mix. It's a mix of Hindi, of Punjabi music, really, Punjab MC with Jay-Z on it, as a way, as you said, to misdirect, so that by the time the hit and run, we catch up to it in the middle of the film, you will think, oh, that's what he wanted for murder for, and not realize it's going to be going to another place still.
I think it's one of the many reasons you were WGA nominated, because it's just such a great narrative device. Anytime that you can lead the audience in a direction where they're very confident as to where they're going, and then pull the carpet out from them in a non-confusing way and still, not lose your audience. It was great. The
opening was hard, honestly, because you're starting, as you said, in the middle of the film, you have no understanding of what's going on. Then I have to jump to the end of the film where he's already an entrepreneur.
Right.
And I have to go backwards to the childhood and then come all the way back to him as an adult and get in this concept of the rooster coop.
It's nonlinear in sections, which is why I think it works so well, but it's not really a nonlinear film per se. But I again think it holds your interest because you're like, wow, how did this kid from this impoverished community become this entrepreneur sitting in an office kicking his feet up?
It's funny because I don't really know who, as you said, WGA nominated. It made me think that if I was listening to this, I'm always curious about the craft of the whole thing. So to get to a green light, it was, contractually, there's two drafts, an optional revision and an optional polish. Yeah. I did all those, but I also did 3 more interim drafts on my own accord and my own free will, because it was just, I wanted it to be strong. And it just took time because there were so many pieces you're juggling around. So it took quite a while to get the damn thing to make sense,
I think one of the other really interesting things about it is you're not just on the quote, regular hero's journey with Balram. You really also have a lot going on with Ashok and Pinky. Yeah. In which they show up as these, foreign acting people that have an American edge to them, right? That are kind of acting like some of the practices they're seeing in India are so wrong, and they're going to change, they're going to revise, they're going to do new great things. But then they both really start in their own ways becoming problems, like the system that they claimed that they were going to be better than. And they have very distinct arcs in that fashion, especially when it comes to, mistreating Balram.
Yeah.
Talk about crafting that arc for each of them. It's less for Pinky, obviously, but she does still throw food on the floor and tell him to clean it up. And
yeah, she has also. I mean, her character was actually, there was much more writing involved for her because she's less drawn out in the novel. In the novel, she's really what Balram sees of her. It works perfectly in the novel because he doesn't know anything about her. He's just imagining who she is.
Right.
But as a screenwriter and then ultimately to direct the movie, I've got to tell the actor something. So her character got completely created. In the novel, she's not a chiropractor. In the novel, she didn't grow up from the age of 12 in Jackson Heights, Queens. These things were all fabricated in the script. They were not in the novel. In order to make her more of a character, and of course, she goes from being quite woke to ultimately leaving the guy behind. She leaves him behind, but she still seems to have more of a conscience than anyone else in the story, despite that she still screws him. So there's no real black and white in the film. You said a hero's journey, but he's really an anti-hero. I mean, he does some terrible things in the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, but it's just interesting because I wasn't sure that Ashok and his wife were going to get, a character arc of their own the way that they do, because you really
Ashok's character changes a lot because, well,
a lot.
Yeah, like Balram, he's also trapped. He's trapped by his own family and his own insecurities. He's unable to be himself when his family's there. He becomes squashed by them. So he has his own journey as well.
It seems almost at the midpoint where the car accident happens with, hitting the kid in the road. And you're like, okay, so now the movie is, how's he going to get out of this? And, the family sells him out completely. They have him sign a confession that he was alone in the car and that he fled the scene. And you set up very smartly that to do anything early on, you set this up before the scene, that any servant that's going to serve a master, not only do they check out the servant, but they check out their family, knowing that they could retaliate if anything wrong is done to them. And you have this kind of dream sequence, I hope, for his family's sake, of what would happen if he did something wrong, and you see the whole family dead and they're coming to kill the nice old granny in the end. And that's kind of the thing that keeps him, on the straight and narrow for most of the movie. And so you're like, okay, so he's going to sign this confession, and you're kind of guessing in the middle of the movie, is he going to be going to jail? Is that the rest of this movie? Or is he going to be on the run, and his family has consequences? And I just love it that, they hit, an impoverished child at 2 a.m. and there's no big manhunt for him because that nobody cares in big cities like that. And he gets away with it. And then you're sitting there like, well, I wonder what's going to happen next. And that's when we start getting into, some of the tropes that audiences would recognize from last year's Parasite, right? Be nice to the help. You don't want to be mean to the servants,
right?
And another arc begins. And I'm curious about kind of your crafting of that and what you think it took for Balram's character to go on his own internal journey, deciding that once he realized that there was bribery money that could be taken, that it was something that he was going to take, because you do it in a bunch of interesting ways. I swear I'm going to let you speak in a second, but I just want to point this out. The most interesting way you did it is there's a red bag of bribe money. And at one point, his dead father is in traffic next to him, telling him why it's okay to take the money, which I really loved. But talk about kind of bringing Balram to that point so that it's believable and not just like a left turn.
Yeah, I mean, it was the sections we worked on a lot. I mean, one of the producers, I'd mentioned McCool, but there's another producer, Bahar Azimi. She's in Paris. She's an Iranian woman in Paris that was my co-writer on Chop Shop, Goodbye Solo, 99 Homes, and was one of the producers of this film. So she's the person I've collaborated with the most in my scripts. And this section was gone over millions of times in the screenplay because we were trying to track so many things. Balram, what we always assumed would be tricky for the Western world to understand is why, after he's forced to sign a forced confession, why does he stick around?
Right.
Why doesn't he just leave? And more complicated, why does some part of him still want to serve and maybe even still kind of like Ashok, despite all that? That was the part we thought would be the hardest for a Western audience to understand. We knew in India they would get it quickly because it's just true to that culture. So there was a lot of time spent on that. And then what becomes the breaking point for him, that he's like, no, forget this. I'm going to start cheating him, which is a whole section where he starts to cheat him.
Which was great. Like all the ways that you showed, stealing gasoline, and basically being an Uber driver almost, even though I know the movie's taking place before Uber existed.
No, but that shared drivers I lived in Iran for 3 years. You had basically Uber. Even in 2000, when I was living in Iran, there was shared taxis. It was very common. Yeah. And, so what leads him to that? And then throughout all that, we were trying to track his descent into becoming a little crazy. Seeing his dead father speaking. There's a sequence which I love because it's not explainable, where he walks into a slum and there's a man taking a crap who just starts laughing. And he pulls his pants down to take a crap and just starts laughing. It can't be explained. It's not understandable or in any logical way, but it was madness,
What were you thinking when you wrote that? Was that a moment in the book, or was it just...
It's in the book. It's a bit more weird in the book, but...
Weirder than that? Okay.
Yeah, there's actually a line of men taking a crap. I reduced it to one. I have a sense of what it is. It's about him. I feel, at least to some degree, it's about him understanding that if he continues on this path of being a servant, he's probably very easily could be a homeless person in a slum. And that he would be reduced to taking a crap right there in the wide open for everyone to see. And, it must have something to do with that. It could be other things too. It should be other things, something that you or someone else would dream about there. But I always thought it would be a powerful and bizarre image and moment that would take us into his head in a weird way,
It was a great moment. And I mean, you're right. He kind of needed to go a little crazy for him to get that idea.
Yeah.
And, as he said, the theme of the movie is it's a rare breed that could ever break out, a white tiger. Right. Yeah. And so as he's becoming the white tiger, he's explaining that he knows that his entire family might be murdered because of his actions. And I'm curious if you ever wanted to answer a question like that definitively or not in the movie, because you had the dream sequence. But
there was another one I had that I cut, but the dream sequence was him imagining, if I took this bag, I guess this is what will happen to my family, and it's haunting to him. The idea of it, I wanted to see what he was seeing in that moment. It was just kind of a creation of what he would imagine.
Right.
But I thought it was always more haunting for him not to know. That all he could do is read a newspaper and wonder, was that my family that was killed in this newspaper article I read or not?
Well, yeah, he's holding a newspaper that says 17 murdered. And it's I didn't go back and count, but I'm kind of guessing that was probably the number of his family in those scenes, right?
It's not exactly, you don't really know. And it's more, I find it in the novel, he never knows either. And I found that haunting, that you have to live with that forever, not knowing what happened to them,
And the way he idolized Ashok, it's just interesting to see that he's really going to kill him over the money. I understand the reason to do it, but obviously it still takes a bit of,
Yes, but I think it's more than the money. It's more than the money. It's even more than he doesn't want to be a servant to another man, which is more than money. Right. Even more than that, he doesn't want to be the servant to a weak man. At a certain point, I feel
that's interesting.
Down, he's becoming insulted that he feels his potential as a human being is more than that man. And how strong can he be as a human being if his master is weak?
Right, because the sock falls apart after Pinky leaves them. So sure, that makes sense. I hadn't thought of that.
One of the breaking points is that scene in the mosquito net where Ashok comes down to see him and condescends to him, and he sings terribly. And Balram understands he's really superior to this guy. And even in the murder, outside of Balram now, as a film, I wanted the murder to be not just Ashok killing Balram, which is why it's been shot handheld and quite visceral close to them. But there's one shot that's on a wide shot on a medium lens, shot at 96 frames in the rain. And that shot is because I wanted the murder to be, in addition to being personal, I wanted it to be epic in scope. I wanted it to be about the centuries battle between servant and master and between rich and poor.
You said there was another dream sequence that was cut. What was it? I mean, obviously we could talk about editing for a second.
You can see it in the trailer. Actually, they use the image in the moment where he reads the newspaper in the end of the film. I shot images of him dressed as entrepreneur Balram in his fancy clothes and his belly and his ponytail. He walked into his dream of the village and saw his dead family and saw his dead brother.
Okay.
And then came back into the cafe, and we realized it was just in his head. But at a certain point in editing, I like that, actually. I miss it sometimes, but it started to feel powerful just to let him sit there and think about it and not see anything.
Sure. Well, editing's the last stage of storytelling. Was there anything else you want to tell us that you learned about your story during the editing process? Scenes that maybe you were able to shift, non-linearly if you needed to, or other lessons?
I mean, in editing, I really believe in the adage, you write the film 3 times. I totally believe that. I've edited 4 of my films alone. I've edited 3 of my films, including The White Tiger, with an editor. This time, Tim Strito. So he was in one room, I was in another room, each of us editing and then passing it back and forth. You always cut more than you ever think you will. It just always happens. There's always less of the movie than you think. You can rearrange scenes. Even the scene in the mosquito net, I rearranged it in the edit room. The last beat of the scene was really in the middle of the scene, and I moved it to the end because it felt like a better ending. So there's always these surprises. The hardest part about editing The White Tiger was COVID, because we edited it during COVID. And starting in March, I was editing alone, and the editor was in his home, and I wasn't able to invite people into the edit room, which is a normal practice and a necessary one, because you've gotten so used to the movie that you need new people to watch the movie, and you want to sit behind them or at a side angle so you can watch them watching the movie and feel where the movie works, where it doesn't work, where it's slow, where they got confused, where they laughed, where they were supposed to laugh and didn't. And we never had that opportunity. So you were just kind of guessing as best you could and sending links to friends, and then they'd call you on the phone. But that's not the same as watching it with them.
What was your toughest scene? What was the scene that you kept coming back to, both as a writer and a director, by the way? And it doesn't have to be the same scene, but on the page, we'll start there. What was your toughest scene that you kept coming back to again and again? And how did you creatively rise to that challenge?
It's not in the movie.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, it was a sequence. There's a sequence from after Pinky Madam leaves, Ashok and Balram get into a fight. They push one another. And then, okay, so from that scene until the murder was the hardest part of the movie to edit, because there were too many scenes in the screenplay. We hedged our bets that we would need more steps to get him to the point of insanity and believing he would murder this man. We thought it would take more scenes than it did. So it was about cutting scenes, rearranging scenes, changing the voiceover to over and over and over again, before at some point it was just like, I guess this is the best I can figure out, and hopefully it'll work, because I can't watch the movie with any other people, What
was your toughest scene then as a director?
I don't know, really. I can't say that. The making of the movie was somehow enjoyable, It's
great. I mean more artistically rather than logistically. Something that
I mean both. There was something when I think back to the feeling of Arvind. The feeling Arvind and I had when he wrote that book and I was making my first films was not knowing things, doing whatever you wanted, feeling free, feeling spontaneous, feeling like you could do anything, that there were not people around you saying no. And inside yourself, you weren't telling yourself no because of experience. You just didn't have it. You were just doing things and enjoying it and having fun. And you felt kind of foolishly invincible. And in making the movie, I was trying to remember those days. That when Arvind was writing the book and when I was writing my first films and making the first films, and I just kind of tried to have fun making the movie, and that encourage my actors to risk, to do whatever they wanted. And if it didn't work, it wouldn't matter. We would just do it again, and we would find other ways. And so there was some feeling on set with the actors and the key crew that we should just enjoy it and try things and risk. We had plans, we had reasons to do things, but we wanted to have fun, honestly.
Look, it shows on the screen because you guys have a very vibrant film, and I really love it. I guess one thing to end on, before we hear about what you're working on next, but one thing to end on would be, since you're WGA nominated for adaptation, an important part of adaptation is not just being, reverent to the book, but being able to separate yourself from it, being able to do something truly different. So invention can be important for adaptation, and people don't give enough credits for that. What was something that you're really happy with that you invented, where you were kind of riffing like a jazz player on what was already inherent in the book?
I mean, probably the biggest things were rearranging the structure. As we talked about, the hit and run, and not talking about the murder, not revealing any of that. And the creation of Priyanka's character. She seems so pivotal in the film now, and none of that was in the novel. It was all fabricated for the film. I think those are the things there's a lot more, but those are the things I'm probably the happiest about.
What's next? What are you working on next?
I'm not home. I'm in Atlanta. Well, I'm about 2 weeks out from shooting a pilot. I can't say what it is yet. They'll make an announcement soon enough. And I'm working.
Is this something that you've written as well?
No. It's by an incredible author with an awesome actor. I kind of got a call about it in Christmas time last year, a few months ago. But I have my own TV series we're hoping to go out with soon to see if anyone's interested.
Are you able to say what it is?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
And but I do have something I can tell you about, which is Arvin's new book, Amnesty. It came out in March. It's awesome. It was on a lot of top 10 lists. And I set it up at Netflix again to work with them. And it's about a Sri Lankan immigrant in Sydney, Australia, who's an illegal. And he cleans homes for a living. And one day he hears about a murder of a woman. And he knows that woman. He used to clean her home like 6 months ago. And he believes he knows who murdered her. It's a man she was having an affair with. But that man knows he's illegal. So if he turns the man in, that man's going to turn him in as an illegal. So he doesn't know what to do. And so it takes place in about 8 hours. It's kind of a cat and mouse game between the two of them as we flash back to understand the weird dynamics between these three characters. And it's kind of asking the question, what are the moral duties of a man who has no rights in this world?
That's great. I mean, I like films like that take place in a compact realm of time. So that's awesome. Have you started your script on it yet?
I've started, yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, because you just said that you're shooting in Atlanta, and there's not a lot of production going on right now in the United States. How do you feel as a director? Does it seem like the COVID protocols are in place properly for you? And basically you're ready to go? Yeah, your mask. Good.
It's tough, man. It's auditioning people by Zoom is my least favorite thing, because I love the audition room. I love meeting actors. I love talking to actors. I love improvising with them. I love, as I said, rewriting with them. I mean, that's so far been the hardest part. The lead actor arrives this week, and I don't even understand how we're doing readings together, I guess, with masks. I mean, it's just, we have to do it safely, and Apple takes it very seriously. It's an Apple production.
Sure. That's great. That's great. I hope to talk to you about it once it's done, once it's in the bag.
Yeah. All right.
I'm a fan of your work, so it was great to talk to you, and congrats again on your WGA nomination for The White Tiger.
Jeff, I want you to check out Plastic Bag. It's my favorite of all my films.
I'm going to watch it tonight. Anything where Werner Herzog is talking, I'm there. I'm there.
And has some really good music from Sigur Rós, from Kjartan, who was in Sigur Rós at that time. Yeah.
I will absolutely check it out. I can't wait to. Cool. Thanks so much for your time, Ramin.
Thanks.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to writer-director Ramin Bahrani for coming down to chat about his WGA-nominated film, The White Tiger. And folks, I really hope you go see The White Tiger. It's a heck of a film. It's sitting right there on Netflix for you right now. So there should be no delay in you going to see it if you haven't seen it already. Go see it. Spread the word. You'll really be happy that you did. And while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. Issue 42, our most recent issue, is packed with tons of great stuff, and we've added to it since it's been published as well. You can see what's inside at the table of contents. You could also test drive us by reading the free issue over at backstory.net. And if you decide that you want to subscribe, I hope you'll become a subscriber, and I'm going to reward you for that. You could use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. And you could use that at backstory.net. That will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. It'll give you access to any new issues that we publish. You'll also have access to our archive of our old issues. Currently goes from about issue 42 to 29. I'm going to keep adding new old issues when I get a chance, I promise. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and my YouTube Backstory Magazine watchers become Backstory Magazine subscribers. So thanks for considering. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. And folks, if you want to reach out to me, you could always find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Yo Goldsmith on Instagram. I also run the Backstory Magazine account, which is Backstory_mag on Twitter or Backstory_mag on Instagram. I have a Facebook fan page. I use it occasionally. Not as often as I should. But yeah, I'm just not on there that much. You could also always email me, yogoldsmith@gmail.com. I promise not to respond to you immediately, so keep that in mind. But I'll get to it when I can. I'm an easy guy to find, so if you want to reach out, feel free to. Look, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.